Afterburn by Crabapple. Chapter 10. Midoriya frowns at his phone screen, lower lip jutting out in plush invitation to kiss away his troubled expression. A bit longer until I see Tensei and hear his advice, Tenya reminds himself. After that, I won't have to be so restrained. He banks the coals of his lustful desires and deliberately turns his attention to trying to snorkel the last of the tapioca beads from his melon bubble tea. It's quite good for shopping mall food court fare. Since the three of them aren't due at the Idaten Hero Agency until 3 p.m., they had debated staying on campus and working on their essays until lunch. After ruining his slacks yesterday, however, and the rest showing distinct signs of strain around the calves, Tenya had wanted to buy some new pairs of pants. Midoriya said he was running low on notebooks, and then Todoroki had wistfully admitted that he'd like to pick up a gift for his mother, and the decision was made. A morning of shopping, lunch at the mall, and then Idaten Agency. Todoroki, indifferent to any watching eyes in the food court crowd, scoots closer to Midoriya on the booth's wide bench seat, bumping shoulders to catch his attention before pressing close to Midoriya's side. Amaraga not answering. Midoriya's pout deepens. She answered, but I can't tell if she's joking or not. I mean, I don't think she is. But she's telling me I need to check my dorm room wall for peepholes, which I think is kind of an overreaction to a few weird texts from Mineta, but she's really insistent, so... Tenya shoves his bubble tea aside so quickly it goes tumbling to the floor with a wet thump and the crack of spilling ice. What weird texts from Mineta? Your drink! Squeaks Midoriya. After, says Todoroki. What weird texts from Mineta? Midoriya presses his phone into Todoroki's hands. You can read them if you want. He started sending them to me yesterday after the lecture. Ida, can you pass me some napkins? He slips from the booth and starts scraping the ice back into the paper cup. Yes, of course. Tenya shakes off the urge to climb across the table and read over Todoroki's shoulder. Ridiculous, Midoriya is going to be a hero. He'll face a lot worse in the line of duty than a text from an unpleasant classmate. I'll treasure your body anytime, reads Todoroki. Then a line of eggplants, and then P.S. tits make your value go up, true facts. The paper napkins make a satisfying tearing sound as Tenya twists them in half. Midoriya wilts. I needed those. Tenya pads at the spilt tea with the shredded paper remains, managing to make a sopping mess and not much else. Sorry, I'll get some more. Having to concentrate on weaving through the chaotic mass of civilians, parents chasing after stray toddlers, teens clumped together around tables, older triads shuffling through the lanes looking for seating, helps cool his head. He breathes deep the mess of sense from the crowd, focuses on smiling faces, makes it to the nearest restaurant and takes a good dozen napkins. Better to have too many than not enough. This is twice now that Tenya's rage has strained its leash over Mineta's treatment of Midoriya, and though his anger isn't unexpected, the strength of it is. He's reacting a lot less like a concerned friend and affronted class president, and a lot more like an animal defending its territory. Tenya sighs. He never thought that he'd become one of those unreasonable, overreacting betas who would snarl and raise haggles at the slightest hint of threat, and yet here he is. But is Mineta really such a slight threat? He shares a dorm room wall with Midoriya, shares changing rooms and bathrooms. He's texting Midoriya inappropriate things, and the comments he made yesterday about Midoriya as a woman still linger unpleasantly in the back of Tenya's mind like garbage on the edge of a once pristine lake. None of the girls have said anything about him being more than an unpleasant nuisance, Tenya admits reluctantly, and they aren't the types to let themselves be taken advantage of. If he was an actual danger, they would have pushed to have him removed. So as disgusting as I find him, he isn't an actual threat. Not quite reassured, he returns to their table where Midoriya is laughingly arguing with Todoroki. All my contacts and pictures are on there, Shoto! Please! Besides, melting it won't get rid of Mineta. It will make me feel better, says Todoroki as he glares at Midoriya's phone. The unease in Tenya's gut settles. No matter how terrible Mineta is, there will be little actual harm he can do with both Tenya and Todoroki on guard.
It would be more practical to simply block his number,
he offers, finally able to be sensible about this. I can't, Midoriya sighs. What if he needs help? Like with a villain or a disaster situation or a rogue Nomu?
There's 18 other students he can text,
Tenya points out. He kneels beside Midoriya and offers him the napkins on upturned palms.
Here.
Midoriya reaches for them, and for a moment his hand is in Tenya's, crooked fingers and freckled skin in stark contrast to Tenya's broad, flat, pale-skinned hand. Is it Tenya's imagination, or is there hesitation in the way Midoriya takes the napkins?
Midoriya.
It's nothing, absolutely nothing, really nothing. Let's talk about something else, like the napkins. You brought a lot, which is good. Please pass me the tray so I can dump the wet stuff on it instead of carrying it all the way to the trash and making more mess, babbles Midoriya, gaze glued to the floor and ears turning suspiciously pink. I mean, unless Shoto wants to freeze them solid. Shoto's raised Midoriya's phone to shield his face, but the sparkle in his eyes betrays his smile. That's an inappropriate usage of a hero's quirk. I'm much more comfortable leaving this in Ida's big, strong hands. Understanding, does, as Midoriya's ears go from pink to deep rose, as the blush scatters its petals across Midoriya's cheeks and down the nape of his neck, as Midoriya ducks his head and murmurs, "We're in public! In public!" Tenya doesn't press since, as Midoriya says, they're in public, and Midoriya is still struggling with his body's sexual reflexes. Instead, Tenya takes the tray from the table and holds it for Midoriya to dump napkins onto and changes the subject.
What did you get for your mother, Todoroki?
Some Mori making kits. 3 patterns. She used to collect them, so I... But Tenya's still thinking about it. On the train to the Idaten agency, they find seats and huddle close, making room for a woman with the enormous shell of a snail, as a group of horned people take up most of the space, the various curls and whorls and points branching from their skulls, making their end of the car decidedly hazardous. Midoriya is too caught up in watching them to be self-conscious of the press of Tenya's body. It's possible that they're related, but the array of phenotypes is awfully broad, and the kinds of horns are all over the map, with some of them actually being antlers. Granted, that might not matter if their quirk is having something sticking out of your head, but since I don't see any antenna or eye stalks... He snuggles up against Tenya's side, settling into a comfortable slouch, mouth moving and hands twitching. The quick smile he flashes the only sign that he notices the arm Tenya curls around his shoulder. That's fine. Tenya's more interested in how their bodies fit together than in pulling Midoriya's attention from his quirk studies. It seems strange to think of someone like Midoriya as small. He's a solid mass against Tenya, heavy with hard muscle and whipcord tension. With his iron will and impressive quirk added in, he's a formidable force. Tenya can still remember the sight of Midoriya's back, a protective wall between himself and Stain. Midoriya had seemed titanic at the time, a figure out of legend. But he really is small. He's shorter than almost all the other boys in their class, barely tops Tenya's nose, and he's built along an acrobat's compact lines with narrow hips and shoulders. Is it because he's an Omega? They do tend to run small. Is that why he likes Tenya's size so much? Tenya had initially assumed it was due to the more intimate measurements of his larger body, but perhaps Midoriya's appreciation is because Tenya seems like a viral beta, large and healthy and able to provide. A sudden thought hits. He nudges his knee against Todoroki's to catch his attention, and when he gets it, asks,
"Do you also enjoy how big I am?"
Todoroki's eyebrows twitch upward. So much for being discreet.
What? Oh!
He flushes and frantically tries to shove aside the misunderstanding with his free hand.
No, not like... I mean, I suppose that's also included, but I actually meant it in a purely general way, such as height and shoulder width and... Wow.
He sighs. I was told most alphas don't enjoy their mages being larger. No, it doesn't bother me. Todoroki tilts his head to give Tenya thoughtful sideways glances. Why?
Just wondering.
he says, suddenly all too conscious of the smaller body pressed against his own, the subtle shift of Midoriya's weight as the train sways and jostles them, the heat of his skin soaking through the too thin fabric of his worn white t-shirt. Todoroki gives Tenya a slow cat-like blink and says, "The thing with Izuku."
Caught. Tenya ducks his head. Well, yes.
"You should talk to him about that," says Todoroki, the cat in him going large and strange and wise, a sphinx with a knowing smile. Knowing Izuku, he'll probably give a very detailed answer. They both look at Midoriya, still lost in his world of quirk analysis, muttering to himself about genetic lineages and mutations as he fills up pages in one of his new notebooks. "I bet he even has diagrams," says Todoroki, "annotations, and numbered lists, measurements, speculative theories carefully jotted down, page after page, all in his slanting handwriting with sections carefully highlighted in his Byzantine color code. Maybe someone else would find the idea intrusive, and maybe if it was someone else doing it, Tenya would too. But he studied with, fought beside, laughed and talked and lived with Midoriya, and this is just how Midoriya is. Writing down everything in the earnest attempt to learn, to understand, to filter through the enormous quantities of information his brain seems to be continuously feeding him and create a semblance of order. So as intimidating as the idea is, it's also touching. Tenya is someone Midoriya cares about. Tenya is someone Midoriya wants to understand." Then Todoroki says in that blunt, quiet way of his, "I might have to wait 2 years for you, but Izuku doesn't." Tenya's heart starts to speed.
I've realized that.
He swallows, forcing movement in a throat gone suddenly rusty and dry.
It's not that I don't want to. I do.
Has spent every night with restless hands and restless thoughts, thighs damp with sweat and palm wet with spit as he works himself into a frenzy, imagining Midoriya peeling away layers of clothing to bare his skin and scars. Midoriya arching his neck and spreading his legs in sweet supplication.
Very much. I was hoping that after this visit with my brother, if Midoriya is comfortable with the idea.
He darts another glance at Midoriya, who's still oblivious and pressed so close, his summer grass scent heavy in the air around Tenya. The temptation is overwhelming, but Tenya's not about to stumble so close to the finish line. He shifts the subject a bit, hoping to distract him.
What about you? Are you sure you're alright with letting a beta you haven't claimed make love to your omega?
I got a mind. It's you. Blunt words have an unexpected impact, says the memory of Midoriya. The one-hit KO of psychological warfare. Tenya certainly feels like he's been knocked down, his words coming out as a breathless protest of,
"You can't be so free with your trust. Someone will take advantage of you."
Todoroki just smiles. Isn't this our stop coming up? Exasperated and flattered by turn, Tenya glances at the station name.
Yes.
He gently shakes Midoriya by the shoulder. Is this our stop, Ida? Asks Midoriya, coming out of his trance. The sound of Midoriya's voice sends shivers hop-scotching down Tenya's spine, raises goosebumps on his skin, makes his pants just this side of uncomfortably tight. He's just gotten permission from their alpha. He could...
It is. The agency is only 2 blocks away, in fact.
He stands, ignoring the slight tremble to his legs, and uses the excuse of helping Todoroki with his bags to put a bit of distance between himself and Midoriya. When they start their walk to the Idaten agency, he puts Todoroki between them.
I was hoping to run a quick errand on the way, however. There's a bakery my brother particularly likes in the neighborhood, and I thought it would be nice if we could bring him some of the apple tarts.
Bribing the judge, murmurs Todoroki.
A wise hero uses every advantage,
Tenya counters. And so they arrive at Idaten Hero Agency armed with a white pasteboard box of apple tarts. Yoko and Oto, the receptionists, smile welcome at the sight of Tenya. They're a pair of older betas, smart and polished in their blue and gray pantsuits with the professional grit to handle everything from lost children and worried parents to reporters and visiting corporate sponsors. They also happen to be licensed sidekicks. A little extra security goes a long way. Your brother told us to expect you and your friends, croons Otto. Her lovely voice carries through the bright open space of the lobby. We have prepared visitor badges for you. Her voice immediately catches Midoriya's attention. Is your voice your quirk? It's beautiful! He gasps. Oh my! Otto presses a hand to her cheek. It's not often I receive such open compliments. It's pure gloss for what she obviously assumes is mere flattery, except that Midoriya stammers, sorry, I didn't mean to be too forward or anything. It was just so incredible that And Otto finds herself faced with charming pink cheeks and green eyes sparkling with admiration, Midoriya's abashed expression unable to hide his fascination. Her professional facade cracks, her own cheeks growing a bit rosy as she realizes just how sincere Midoriya is being. Thank you. I don't get to show it off very much as a receptionist. Midoriya sucks in a breath. Then Tenya shoves his hand in front of Midoriya's face.
Stop.
He points sternly at the guest log.
Sign in and take your badge, please, so that we can go visit Tensei first. You can interrogate Otto about her quirk after that, as long as you don't mind, he says to her. Though I have to warn you, once Midoriya starts, he's likely to keep going for hours.
As Midoriya dutifully signs into the guest log, Todoroki drifts over from where he'd been studying the garden view from the windows. This isn't what I was expecting, he tells Tenya. It's nice. Tenya thinks of photos he's seen of Endeavor's offices, the black, chrome, and scarlet, in severe minimalist versions of traditional Japanese decor. For all that Endeavor is the flame hero, the image his agency projects is very cold, and a stark contrast to the blue and white of the Idaten agency, with its cathedral-ceiling lobby and enormous windows, its comfortable denim couches, and the waterfall of its Art Deco-inspired staircases.
It hasn't changed much from the founder's design. Tensei had been talking about renovations, but I can't think of what I'd alter.
Todoroki mulls this over. Says, dead serious. Out of Fortune Cat. Tenya's saved from having to answer when Yoko glides over. I've reached your brother. He says to go right in. She smiles at him, dimpling, and her eyes sparkle as she whispers, You should go before Otto tries to steal that young Omega away.
Thank you, Yoko, says Tenya fervently.
The knowing look she gives him hints her timing wasn't an accident. Midoriya is quick to come when Todoroki calls, Izuku, we're going. And together the trio head up the stairs and deeper into the building. While Todoroki is quiet and reserved, mindful of the professional atmosphere, there's a spring in Midoriya's step and a smile on his lips. His head is always moving, his eyes wide as he tries to take in every sight. They hit the security checkpoint and he positively screams in delight, mumbling the names of the sidekicks manning the station. Jinyu and Tripper! As well as the ones they pass in the halls on the way to Tensei's office. Leaf Bomb! Firefly! Skywatch! A fidgety energy crackling along his limbs as he walks beside Tenya. He's absolutely thrilled to be here, and Tenya's heart squeezes as if it's so full of affection it wants to hug itself. This has always been something Tenya has deeply appreciated about Midoriya. That while All Might obviously holds a place of pride in Midoriya's eyes, he is not blinded by the number one hero's brilliance. Midoriya admires all heroes, no matter their rank, no matter their role. He knows their struggles and their accomplishments, their weaknesses and strengths. So though Tensei isn't All Might, Midoriya is not any less enthusiastic, because Midoriya doesn't need Tensei to be All Might. Being Ingenium is just as admirable. Well, perhaps not quite as admirable, he corrects himself, but close. Nor has his brother's disabled status impacted Midoriya's attitude. To Midoriya, Tensei is still Ingenium, just as All Might is still number one. In a world that feels like it's forgetting too quickly what Tensei has sacrificed, that means a lot to Tenya. In hindsight, he should probably have thought through the implications of that a bit more. It's Midoriya, after all. Tensei's office has changed. There's obvious things, like how his desk has been swapped for a lower, broader model to accommodate his wheelchair, and the custom treadmill has been removed. There's more subtle aspects, like how the pictures and the paperweights and the office supplies have all migrated to a middle space, vacating the top and bottom shelves so Tensei can reach them. And then there's the things that you'd only catch if you'd been here often and knew Tensei's habits, good and bad, developed over years of being in Genium. The helmet that should be carelessly propping up law books is missing. The half-drunk cans of energy drink and empty tins of muzzle balm are no longer littering the desk. There's no sweat-drenched towel stinking up the coat rack. No memos pasted to the door to keep Tensei from forgetting some obscure policy update. There are no sidekicks lounging on the guest chairs, teasing their boss and dodging work. There's me, thinks Tenya. I haven't left. But am I enough? Beside him, Todoroki sits nibbling at one of the apple tarts Tensei had graciously shared, making careful conversation while Midoriya stays silent, mouth full of pastry and eyes full of stars. No, I won't be joining my father's agency. I couldn't stand it, says Todoroki. Tensei hums thoughtfully. Is that so? I suppose having him for a father and boss would be a bit stifling for a teenage alpha looking to make a name for himself. No, I just dislike him, Todoroki says in massive understatement. I see. Tensei has to pause for a moment to process that. He's been operating on what Tenya's recognized as his public face, friendly and professional for this first meeting, and doesn't seem quite sure how to proceed in the face of such stark honesty. That's too bad. A family business offers a number of advantages to a hero. He flashes a smile at Tenya. My own has certainly helped me lots, both as Ingenium and now. It would have been rough going, getting used to things without help, and it's nice to have something to do with all this downtime. I've been doing a lot of administration. It's make work, but at least I'm being useful. Still, now that I'm finishing up on physiotherapy and finally used to the chair, it's time I took a good look at my future options. Speaking of which, Tensei probably meant it as a lead-in to discuss Tenya's future. Tensei didn't realize what it meant to say those words with Midoriya in the room! Are you considering going back into heroics? It's an honest question, completely without malice, but by asking it, Midoriya has managed to stab at the tender scabbing of Tensei's deepest wound. Tenya's mind races to find a solution to how to stop this onrushing disaster, but a turbo kick isn't something that will work here. He watches, horrified, as shock bursts across Tensei's face in ugly splatters, and Midoriya is still going! Since your quirk is in your arms, it hasn't been hampered by the attack, right? Now that you're used to the wheelchair, you can make good use of it. A lower center of gravity and the grip provided by wheels means you'd probably be faster, especially if you got your support people to streamline the design, though you'd have a trickier time on uneven surfaces, I guess. Actually, since you yourself are the engine, I wonder if you'd be able to work something that converts from ground to air transport. He's caught up in his own momentum, words tumbling out in an unstoppable avalanche of sound, carrying them all careening down the slope of this social disaster! In terms of combat ability, you've taken a hit, so it might be difficult for you to return to full hero status, but you'd be amazing as a sidekick specializing in transport and pursuit, especially if you teamed up with other people from your agency with less mobility. The Idaten motto has always been the right people in the right places, so you've already got the advantage of established tactics to help form a framework, as well as a huge talent pool to draw on for potential team-ups. Someone like Snare or Glue Gun, or even Triple Trouble would be great for maximizing your effectiveness at villain apprehension while minimizing the need for actual combat. But that's only if you want to keep going in heroics, says Midoriya, finally stumbling to a halt and registering the stupefied expression on Tensei's face. You might, not want to go back to being a sidekick after being a pro hero for so long. Or maybe you want to go into teaching since you're so experienced. or into support to help develop products for other speedsters, or maybe you just want to retire. I don't know. I'm really sorry for assuming. I'd love to be a sidekick, rasps Tensei, a warble on the edge of his voice, face alight, a desperate shade of hope. Returning to heroics in any form is something more than anything, He closes his eyes and makes a visible effort to swallow back the rest of his words. He breathes deeply, and the air floods with the citrus and iron of a scent. His back straightens, and when his eyes open, they're filled with something that had been missing from Tensei these past few months. Determination. You've given me a lot to think about. He has to pause to clear his throat. You seem to really enjoy quirk training and tactical usage. Would you like to see our training facilities? There's probably some people working out there right now. Really? Could I? Gasps Midoriya, leaning forward and gripping the edge of the desk, heedless of the sticky apple fingerprints he's leaving behind. I thought that sort of thing was agency trade secrets. No, that's just to keep the press out, lies Tensei. He tosses Tenya a conspiratorial grin, backing up his wheelchair before wheeling it around the desk and toward the office door. Then he pauses by Midoriya's chair, cocks his head and says, Besides, you're going to be Tenya's Omega, right? That makes you family. Oh! It's a full Midoriya meltdown as he buries his head in his arms and curls in on himself, trying to hide the scarlet of his blush, making a brilliant sunrise on his face, the lovely smile tilting his lips. Isn't that too much? I mean, I guess it's technically true, but I would never presume to claim that kind of tie, especially since we really don't know each other. Tensei laughs. Sigh, huh? Don't worry, we'll get you past that. Now come on and open the door for me. Not that he actually needs the help. It's just to get Midoriya out of his cocoon of self-depreciation. It works, too! Midoriya blurting, yes! Right away, sir! And scrambling out of his chair, all embarrassment forgotten. Ingenium's always had excellent people skills. I was going to show you the general training facilities, but since you seem so interested in my quirk, I thought you might like to see the Ingenium track. All the walls are padded, of course, and so are most of the obstacles. Can't get away from that when you've got a family of speedsters messing around with new techniques. Tenya did a lot of training here when he was a kid, and a good thing. He had a heck of a time learning how to turn. It's amazing! How did you manage to find so much space downtown to build it? How did you even afford it? Asks Midoriya, leaning over the catwalk's railing to gape down at the maze of ramps, posts, walls, and pipes and wires of the Idaten's B1 training ground. Beside him, Todoroki scans the area with acute interest. Naked cement and blue crash mats are the prevailing theme, with reflective paint adding odd splashes of color and the industrial fluorescent lights casting everything below into stark relief while leaving the catwalk in strange half-shadow. Tensei laughs, voice echoing across the vast underground space. It's one of those bonuses of family business I was talking about. This was actually once an underground parking garage for a shopping mall that got demolished in the early chaos of quirk manifestation. One of our more ambitious ancestors snapped up the property rights. I think they had plans for a hotel, but then our family quirk stabilized and we got into the hero business and, well, Idaten agency discovered it had the perfect on-site training grounds. He jabs a finger downward. We've actually got 2 more training facilities on the levels below this one for general quirk and physical combat, and one for incident simulations and group training. Todoroki looks over his shoulder at Tensei. Aren't the property taxes a problem? They're high, Tensei admits. We compensate by renting out our facilities to all the smaller hero offices and police stations in the area.
And with advertising deals,
grumbles Tenya, the memory of endless cartons of strawberry milk surfacing in his memory like a murky pink kaiju rising from the waves. More of Tensei's laughter rumbles out, scattering through the air and tumbling against the concrete walls and ceiling. You still haven't forgiven me for the Ichigo Go contract, huh? And after it helped you grow so big and strong.
Well, I admit there was some benefits,
Tenya says. He very carefully does not look at Midoriya. Right now, there's really only Mom and Dad using this space. Mama when she wants to stretch her legs, and Tenya when it comes for a visit. Tensei eyes Midoriya's own fidgety legs, the hungry expression on his face. Grins. Want to try it? Midoriya squeaks in delight. Can I? Why not? I told you no one's really using it. Of course, it's not exactly geared to your quirk, but after seeing you give it your all in those YouTube clips of the sports festival's race, I figure you can appreciate a runner's obstacle course. There's a ladder down over there. Just don't break anything, okay? Midoriya winces and rubs his hand through his messy curls. That shouldn't be a problem. I've gotten much better at control. I haven't broken anything in months, he adds with a shy smile. Yeah, then get down there and show me how far you've come, says Tensei, obviously under the mistaken impression that Midoriya's radical deviation from expected behavior had been a fluke. The fires of Midoriya's competitive spirit blaze to life. Yes, sir! Before Tenya or Todoroki can say anything, he's grabbed the catwalk railing and leapt over it, hanging suspended in midair for a moment before hurtling downward in a crack of green lightning. He lands in a thunderclap of air and verdant sparks, uses his momentum to send himself rushing toward the first set of obstacles, and promptly starts ricocheting along the pinball track of the course, scattering green-tinted light and shadows across the walls and ceiling in flashing trails. And Tensei's left draped over the railing, having flung himself out of his wheelchair with the help of his quirk, trying to stop Midoriya from his crazy jump, his mouth open and hands still outstretched from futilely trying to catch hold of an unstoppable force. Tenya promptly grabs hold of him to keep Tensei from tumbling over the railing after Midoriya, coaxes his brother to sling an arm around Tenya's shoulders. What is he? How is he? Stammers Tensei. Is that his quirk? I thought it was kinetic blasts. You mean because of his fight with me during the sports festival, says Todoroki, holding the chair steady as Tenya helps his brother get settled again. It looked like kinetic blast because his control was so poor. He could only manage to turn it on or off like a light switch, and had to restrict himself to short bursts of power, since each time he used his quirk it broke his bones. His face grumbles. He damaged his hand so badly in that fight he needed surgery. It'll never work quite right again. Tensei sucks in a sharp breath. What? Why the hell was his control so bad? What kind of quirk counseling did they give him in school? They didn't give him any, says Todoroki. It should have been a shock, but after hearing about the assault by Bakugo and the abuse from the doctor, Tenya finds himself unsurprised to find yet another black mark in Midoriya's past. So when he said he hadn't broken anything lately, Tensei buries his face in his palms. I was joking about the equipment. The equipment! After the pair of you totaled the stadium. I had no idea. Todoroki continues. He's badly damaged his arms as well. He had to completely rethink his fighting style because too much strain could leave them non-functional. He looks down at Tensei and says quietly, Izuku's had some of the most severe physical wounds I've ever seen, and he's overcome them to continue with his training as a hero. So when he says that he thinks you can return to the field, he's not giving empty encouragements. Tensei lowers his hands slowly, meets Todoroki's gaze. Todoroki is the first to look away. He stares down at the comment of Midoriya's sparking shape, expression shifting so subtly it looks more like an illusion from the training room's roiling greenlit shadow. For what it's worth, I agree. But I also understand what it means to feel pushed into a decision by family duty. His gaze drifts up to the dark corners of the training room and lingers there, trapped in some memory of endeavor. Then he blinks and glances at Tenya. Smiles. Tenya and I have agreed to wait for claiming until we're of legal age so we can have a formal marriage with valid prenuptial contracts to protect the Idaten agency from my father's ambitions. So, make whatever decision you feel is right. You don't have to worry about the Ingenium legacy disappearing. I see, says Tensei, and while he's obviously trying to keep a professional smile, his voice is suspiciously husky and his eyes are growing traitorously damp. And now it's his turn to stare into the darkness. Todoroki looks at Tenya again, hesitant. Tenya mouths, "Thank you, Shoto."
It's only fair he gets to use given names, too.
Shoto's answering blush might be almost invisible in the odd light of the room, but Tenya can tell it's there by the slight widening of mismatched eyes at the back of his head. The quick way he makes his escape, muttering, "I'll go make sure Izuku doesn't smash into a wall," and slinging himself over the railing, ice blossoming under his feet to arc from the catwalk to the ground in a long silver slide, carrying him away from Tenya, his brother, and any further emotional vulnerability. Tenya smiles in admiration as he watches Shoto flee. A good hero knows when to retreat. Besides, he thinks, looking at the wet tear tracks on Tensei's face, Shoto and Midoriya have done more than enough. To have Midoriya ripple with the darkness Tensei had lost himself in and force the light of hope back into his life, a sunrise that would not be denied. To have Shoto offer his own reassurances, the gentle touch of night that allows for weakness and doubt. To have the two of them save his brother from the purgatory he'd been lingering in, bring the smile back to his face and the pain finally bleeding out of his soul in salty streaks so he could start to heal. Tensei croaks, You've got good taste."
"Yes,"
says Tenya.